So this is functions of hypothalamus. Functions of hypothalamus. First function है endocrine function that perform this function via its connection with pituitary gland. So what kind of pituitary gland? This is control of anterior pituitary gland and control of posterior pituitary gland and its functions. So what is an anterior pituitary gland? So in anterior pituitary gland control secretion of all anterior pituitary hormone by secreting, releasing and inhibitory hormones. There are 7 types of hormones: GHRH, GHRP, GHIH, TRH, CRH, GnRH and PIH. So these are hormones that releasing, inhibiting and secreting. Second, control of posterior pituitary functions. So in posterior pituitary functions, we are talking about hypothalamus secretes 2 hormones. There are 2 hormones are ADH and oxytocin. So there is synthesized by neurons of supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei of hypothalamus and transported by means of oxonic flow through hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Second, autonomic function. So what is autonomic function? Sympathetic division is regulated by posterior lateral nuclei of hypothalamus and parasympathetic is regulated by anterior group of nuclei. In autonomic there are 2, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic is regulated by posterior and lateral nuclei of hypothalamus and parasympathetic is regulated by anterior group of nuclei. So third one is circadian function. So what is in circadian functions? So regular recurrence of physiological process or activities which occurs in cycle of 24 hour. This is also called diurnal rhythm. Occurs in response to recurrent daylight and darkness. Cyclic changes taking place in various physiological processes are set by means of a hypothetical internal clock called biological clock. So suprachiasmatic nucleus of hypothalamus sets the biological clock by its connection with retina via retinohypothalamic fibers. So we're talking inside maintain circadian rhythm of sleep, hormonal secretion, thirst, hunger, appetite, etc. So this is circadian functions. This is important. Biological clock is very important in circadian function. Fourth is temperature regulation. So what is in temperature regulations? Regulation of body temperature depends on balance between the mechanism that controls heat loss and heat gain. So hypothalamus plays key note in central mechanism of temperature regulation. So क्या काम करता है? Anterior hypothalamus में क्या होता है? तो that detects body temperature by sensing the temperature of blood and by receiving inputs from thermoreceptors. So in this they detect body temperature by sensing the temperature of blood and receiving inputs from thermoreceptor. So he can information about the body temperature through the blood temperature. If temperature is above the set point, anterior hypothalamus actives mechanism that promotes heat loss by cutaneous vasodilation and sweating. So अगर हीट लॉस होता है तो बॉडी टेम्परेचर डिक्रीज होती है. हीट लॉस डिक्रीजेज बॉडी टेम्परेचर. अब पोस्टीरियर में क्या होता है? रोल ऑफ पोस्टीरियर हाइपोथैलेमस. इट एक्टिवेट्स मैकेनिज्म दैट इंक्रीजेज हीट प्रोडक्शन एंड प्रमोट हीट गेन. that is depends mainly on info provided by cutaneous receptors. If temperature is low, post hypothalamus actives heat conservation by cutaneous vasoconstriction and piloretraction. That is also increases release of catecholamines. There is release of catecholamines from adrenal medulla. So in these many endogenous pyrogens like cytokinase act on preoptic area of hypothalamus to produce fever. So that's because cytokinase interleukins increase release of prostaglandins. इसकी वजह से मतलब जो साइटोकाइंस इंटरल्यूकन्स इंक्रीज होता है तो रिलीज ऑफ प्रोस्टाग्लैंडिन्स और इसकी वजह से फीवर प्रोड्यूस होता है दैट प्रोड्यूसेस फीवर. So that is temperature regulations. There is role of anterior hypothalamus in temperature regulation and role of posterior hypothalamus in temperature regulation. And so next we are talking about fifth function, that is regulation of food intake. So what is in regulation of food intake? So in regulation of food intake we are talking about first we are talking about neural factor. So what is in the neural factor? So it is regulated by two centers present in hypothalamus, feeding and sati center. We are talking about feeding center. Feeding center is in lateral hypothalamus nucleus. Feeding center is in lateral hypothalamus nucleus. Stimulation leads to uncontrolled hunger and increased food intake. That is called hyperplasia. अगर फूड इंटेक इंक्रीज होता है और अनकंट्रोल्ड हंगर होता है तो उसको हाइपरप्लेजिया कहते हैं. और डिस्ट्रक्शन लीड्स टू लॉट ऑफ एपेटाइट, भूख कम लगना, एपेटाइट, लॉस ऑफ एपेटाइट, उसको अनोरेक्सिया कहते हैं. ये नॉर्मली ऑलवेज एक्टिव होता है. फिर आता है सेटाई सेंटर. सो इसमें क्या होता है, तो इन वेंट्रोमीडियल न्यूक्लियस ऑफ हाइपोथैलेमस स्टिमुलेशंस कॉजेज लॉस ऑफ एपेटाइट एंड सीजेशन ऑफ फूड इंटेक. फूड इंटेक पे रोक लगा देता है. सो डिस्ट्रक्शन लीड्स टू हाइपरफेजिया एंड एनिमल बिकम ओबीस. दैट इज कॉल्ड hypothalamus obesity. That is another type of obesity. We have many types of obesity, but this is a hypothalamus obesity. So that plays an important role in regulation of food intake by temporary inhibition of feeding center after food intake. In food intake, regulation of food intake, second factor is hormonal factors. So most of are either severe from hypothalamus or HT to influence food intake. So there are many hormones. We are more talk about in detail in next video. Third factor is a metabolic factor. So metabolic factor, plasma glucose construction is important metabolic factor for regulation of feeding. So metabolic factor रेगुलेशन करता है फीडिंग को, जो खाते हैं हम. फिर सिक्स्थ है रेगुलेशन ऑफ वाटर इनटेक, जो हमारे शरीर में पानी लेते, फ्लूइड लेते हैं, तो उसका रेगुलेशन है. तो हाइपोथैलेमस प्लेज एन इम्पोर्टेंट रोल इन वाटर इनटेक. So hypothalamus plays important role in everything, but water intake is a major role. So in two major factors affect this. First is plasma osmolality and extracellular fluid volume. अब ये hypothalamus होता है, it is changes in these factors. So the factors are HT is major thirst center in brain. Second, OVLT and SFO. This is the area of hypothalamus that respond to thirst. So seventh, control of reproductive function. So hypothalamus secretes gonadotropin releasing hormone that is called GHRH. So in a gonadotropin releasing hormone, it is a clinical role in reproductive function and sexual behavior. GnRH secreting neurons that is located in preoptic area. प्रियोप्टिक एरिया में ये लोकेटेड होता है. हाइपोथैलेमस कंट्रोल सेक्सुअल बिहेवियर in experimental animals. Seventh, so other functions, there are more functions in details. We have only name in the notes. So first is influence on emotion, second role in sleep, and third is role in immunity. So this is other functions, or these 6 are the main functions.